Hello, and thank you for joining us today for the Secrets of How I Double My Revenue, an Atticus Advantage webinar. Today we have two attorneys who will be sharing their experiences with you of what happened before, during, and after their attendance at the W Revenue Workshop. But before we begin, I'd like to just go over a little bit of information for you about Atticus. If you're not familiar with Atticus, it was founded in 1989 to provide in-depth, ongoing support and accountability programs for attorneys and law firms that effectively help you increase your gross revenue and income, reduce the stress and the number of hours that you spend in the office, develop greater career satisfaction, but most importantly, allow more time for family, the things you love to do, your personal interests. If you want to ask a question during the webinar, there are a couple of methods. We'll have a session toward the end of the webinar where we open everything up, but you can use the chat function on your dashboard to send a message to the event organizer. That's me, Mike Wells. I'm a resource advisor here at Atticus. If you'd like your question to remain anonymous, please indicate so in that message. The other method is just to click the hand icon on your GoToWebinar dashboard to indicate that you have a question or comment, and I'll call on you. And when I do, I'll unmute you so that you can be heard by everyone. The intention of today's webinar is we have two goals. We want to help you evaluate the W Revenue Workshop and determine if it's a right fit for you. And two, consider whether there may be another way that we can support you with your growth goals in your practice. Right now, I'd like to ask you to get out a pencil and paper. Mark will ask you surely to write a few things down, and chief among those will be some dates. And you'll see these dates appear again in the presentation. But if you can, grab a piece of scratch paper, pull it out. If you have your cell phone nearby, maybe put it on silent. This is a great time for you to invest in your practice, and we'd love to have your full attention so that you can get the most out of this webinar. I'd like to talk about the agenda as well. I'm going to introduce our panel. We'll talk about why we created this workshop. Mark will give you an overview of the workshop and what your mindset is around growth. Mark Powers, our founder, will interview the panel, and then he'll go over some action steps that we recommend. So as I mentioned, Mark Powers is going to be leading this presentation on our panel. He's the president and founder of Atticus. He's been coaching attorneys around the country for more than 25 years. He's a top legal coach, a dynamic speaker with a lot of substance. He's constantly being asked for keynote speaking engagements around the country. But he also does give some personalized training one-on-one. He's the author of 3 of our top-selling books, Time Management for Attorneys, How Good Attorneys Become Great Rainmakers, and Hire Slow, Fire Fast. Our other panelists today, we have Russ Rosenthal, who co-heads the Personal Injury Department at Cohen & Ducey. He's a senior member of the firm's litigation department. Russ took the W Revenue Workshop in 2004. Next, we have attorney Carl Dore. And Carl took the W Revenue Workshop 3 times, if you can believe that. And there's a good reason for that. Carl's practice is based out of Texas. He works in real estate, oil, and gas. So right now I'm going to hand over the presentation to Mark Powers, and Mark's going to begin our discussion.
Great. Thank you, Mike. Welcome, Carl. Welcome, Russ. Thank you for being on the call. So if you're on this call, other than Carl and Russ, I'm assuming that you have some interest or curiosity about the W Revenue Workshop. And I think one of the places to start is, why W Revenue? And it's actually quite, I want you to look at that question quite literally, and I would write it down. Why do you want to double your revenue? I know why we want you to do it, but for yourself, take a minute. If you have any true curiosity about attending the workshop, write down your answer to that. Why do you want to double your revenue? So you'll come up with a number of reasons. I'm sure you definitely want more money. You want to take your practice to the next level. You want to increase your personal income. You'll have a number of reasons, but I can tell you why Atticus wants you to double your revenue. We want you to do it because it's almost well, I'll say it this way, it's critical that you do. The profession is changing so rapidly We need to challenge ourselves. We need to challenge our thinking. We need to challenge our way of doing business if we're going to really stay ahead of the competition and stay relevant in our practice. And if you just take a second to think about it for a moment and the growth in the number of lawyers in the market. If you've ever seen an Atticus speaker, they'll tell you these facts, but you really should think about them and write them down for a second because it has enormous implications on your practice. In 1968, there were about 167,000 licensed lawyers in this country. 1968, 167,000. By 1986, we had grown to 680,000 licensed lawyers. By the year 2000, we went up to 1 million. And right now in 2017, we're at about 1.4 million licensed lawyers in this country. Now, growth in the number of lawyers in and of itself is no big deal, but where it becomes a big deal is that the growth in lawyers hasn't kept up with the demand in legal services. And a way to look at that is in 1968, we had one attorney for every 1,200 Americans, man, woman, and child. So there's one attorney for every 1,200 Americans. By 1986, that ratio had gone from 1 to 1,200 to 1 to 334. One attorney for every 334 Americans. And today, it's closer to one attorney for every 250 Americans. Man, not necessarily clients, man, women, and child. So it really means that the marketplace has changed. The demand for your services is far more competitive. You're going to have to work a lot harder. You're going to have to be a much better business person. And the market isn't adjusting very well. Law schools, instead of reducing the number of lawyers, are adjusting their price. The marketplace should almost adjust naturally and reduce the number of lawyers, but law schools haven't, they don't have to listen to the market, they listen to their own profit numbers, and so they're lowering tuition, and they're still putting a good number of students out every single year. And on top of that, we've got outside competitors entering the market. You've got LegalZoom, Google, even Walmart is getting into it. I don't know if you know this, but Walmart in Canada is testing something called legal access. So it's sort of like a pharmaceutical. They have a legal access inside of their stores. So they're testing those things. And then we have tax changes or tort reform or PIP reform. So all of these things, to me, in Atticus world, says we have no choice but to find new ways to have a competitive advantage in the marketplace. And from our perspective, the W revenue is a perfect place to do that and to challenge yourself. So we've tested this workshop. We've taught the workshop since 2004. Several hundred attorneys have attended. And in our experience, the following things will happen. 40% of the people that attend, of the attorneys that attend, will double their revenue. Another 30% will see significant growth, between 20 and 50%. So some of them will say, well, my income only went up 50%, which is still good, but we want W revenue. And there's another group, 20 to 30%, that will go back to their practice after doing it, and they'll fall into the rut that they had before they got there. They'll be too busy to implement any of the ideas they created. I know that they'll leave the program absolutely convinced that they can double their revenue, but if they go back and they start doing the same things they did before they came, they don't see the results. So they get too busy, a staff quits, something happens, and they just don't implement. So let me give you a brief overview of the W revenue before we get into our interview section, just so that those of you that are curious what happens. We start at 8:30. You're going to discuss 10 reasons why you can double your revenue. We're going to talk about some of the key industry trends, and we're going to do something called the strategic pathway. And so this discussion is critical for every attorney. And no matter where you are in Atticus, whether you're just entering or you're doing any workshop or any program, it's critical that we understand the strategic pathway to developing a competitive advantage. I'll mention something about that in a minute. Then we'll talk about the breakthrough reason that we know you can double your revenue. We'll have lunch together. It's included in the program. And then we'll spend probably close to 2 hours, 2.5 hours, brainstorming ways to double your revenue. So you're in a room with a group of people that are committed to doubling their revenue, and you'll come up with between you, you'll come up with about 300 ideas for doubling your revenue. We'll take those ideas, we'll narrow them down, and we'll come up with an action plan. And then we'll build what we call a practice growth map. We'll do an exercise to test your plan. So before you leave, we're going to take your plan and see if it's pie in the sky. We're going to give it a test, reality test, and see if it will work, and then we'll be done at 5 o'clock. So you will leave this I know that Carl and Russ have done this program, and they can tell you the same thing, but I would tell you that this is a transformational workshop in the way that you approach and think about your practice. You're going to leave with a model to challenge your reality around practicing law. You're going to leave with the belief that you can absolutely double your revenue, and you're going to leave with a game plan to do that, to double your revenue. So anyone that is going to attempt to double their revenue has to have a shift in the way they're thinking, and they have to move from the traditional status quo thinking. And most attorneys that you're dealing with, when they're going to double their revenue, or quite frankly when they're not, they don't have any real process, any method for growing their practice. They go through the traditional model of just working harder, thinking it's all going to work out. There's no written game plan, no big plan. And we want to make a shift to intentionally grow your practice. The truth is that anyone can accidentally grow their practice. Quite frankly, you can just sort of inertia over time. We can go from 100,000 to 200,000. It's tougher to go from 500,000 to 1 million or 1 million to 2 million accidentally. But you can do it early on accidentally and think you're there. But the question is, how can we strategically, intentionally get there with a methodology and a predictable way of getting significant jumps in your practice? So it takes a shift in our thinking, in our role, and in our approach. So I mentioned the strategic pathway. And so this is a pathway for developing a competitive advantage. I'm not going through this whole thing here. I've done that on other calls. We do that at the W Revenue Workshop. But I just want you to see that there are 3 stages of developing any practice. And the first stage we call the great lawyer mindset. And at the great lawyer mindset, the thing you should know is that 80% of your competitors live at this stage of development. And this is the stage that we have to break out of. So let me talk about mindset. I'm not going to go through this whole pathway. Not that I wouldn't love to take you through there, but we've got 2 great attorneys on this call that we want to talk to, and this is something that you'll do at the program. But when you think about mindsets, write this down. Your eyes only see, and your ears only hear what your mindset is looking for. I'll say that again. Your eyes only see, and your ears only hear what your mindset is looking at. So if you're the great lawyer mindset, you're what Michael Gerber would say, working in the business. You're working in the firm. If you're developed a different mindset, which is a growth mindset about the practice, we would say that you're working on the practice. And those are very different things. In the great lawyer mindset, the focus is on income. We're looking at how do we get more income. In the practice growth mindset, we're focused on marketing and profits. In the great lawyer mindset, we focus on, or let me say that differently. the question we ask every morning is, what is the most important thing we need to do today? What work has to be done today? And if we're coming from the other mindset, which we all want to step in, this sounds very simple, these two different mindsets, but it takes a true shift in your paradigm to get this. It's one of the things you will do at the workshop, but when we're working on the business in the practice growth mindset, we're asking a different question. We're saying, we would say that the work of the business is to produce value for the clients. So the great lawyer would say the work is the most important thing. The practice growth mindset would say the work of the business is to produce value for the client. Great lawyer mindset, we're focusing on getting through the day. In the practice growth, we're focused on working on the cornerstone systems, time management, marketing, staffing, cash flow, systems that make good people look great. In the great lawyer mindset, personal boundaries are fungible. In that mindset, we'll work weekends, evenings, those sort of things. But in the practice growth mindset, the boundaries are critical, because without boundaries, we don't get to shape, we don't get to challenge ourselves. Great lawyer mindset tends to cover up inefficiencies with their time and their life and their money. If we can't, the practice growth mindset doesn't do that. So the firm is dependent on the leader. We call that the heroic leader in the great lawyer mindset. In the practice growth mindset, we start shifting that to post-heroic. And that mindset eventually opens up that third tier, so in the strategic pathway, of working on other leaders. So practice growth mindset, which we just left, is working on the firm. Here we're working on other leaders. We become post-heroic. We've killed off the hero. We're no longer the hero in the business. We're creating talent vacuums. We're creating opportunities for other people to step in and be great and make mistakes and learn instead of micromanaging. We act as a catalyst, and here, we don't lose our focus on marketing, and we don't lose our focus on profits, but we start building profit centers inside of the organization. We look for vision and strategic perspectives, and here we have a succession plan. How do we transition or sell the practice one day? So those are just some of the basic shifts that have to start to happen, and we think about that and we work on that at the DYR, as well as come up with your game plan. But when you get the market leader mindset and start thinking differently, it'll give you 95% advantage. Excuse me. Let me restate that. It'll give you a competitive advantage over 95% of the marketplace, and you'll do a good job of increasing your personal freedom. All of this requires, at least from Atticus's perspective, that we use a change formula. And this formula that I'm going to share with you, I'd write down because it works whether you're getting in shape, working out and getting in shape. It works if you're learning to play golf. It works if you want to get better at music. Anything in life that you want to get better at, this is the formula. There has to be a compelling reason. And what that means, if we get someone that comes to Atticus and they're not compelled to grow their practice, if they're not compelled to excellence, if they're not compelled on their own to bring the practice to another level, there's nothing we can do with them. It's almost like someone going in to see a personal trainer and they don't have any goal to get healthy. They're going for some particular reason. And I have no idea why they would. But it has to be your compelling reason. Nobody can do it for you. But once you have a compelling reason, there has to be accountability towards that goal. And there has to be follow-up. For most of us, we fall into inertia if we don't have that. And finally, there has to be direction. There's somebody that's seen it before that can get us through that window faster before it closes and can give us an advantage over our competitors. So someone has seen it done before and can help us get there faster. And so that's some sort of coaching structure for guidance, direction, accountability, and supporting your goals. So that's the change formula that we'll have to have if we're doing the W revenue. So that's enough about the W revenue workshop for now. What I'd like to do is I'd like to come back to Russ and to Carl, and their websites are right there, so that if you would like to visit their website, please do that. And if you're in their markets, I'm going to ask Carl and Russ to say a little bit about their practices and why, number one, you should refer business to them, and then we'll talk about the experience. Russ, you want to go first? Tell people a little bit about your practice and where you are.
Sure. My practice is up in Boston and all through Massachusetts. We are a personal injury firm. I like to call us a boutique firm in terms of the way we handle our cases and the way we work with our clients. And I've been doing this, in June will be 33 years, and we're part of, we're a personal injury department, part of another larger firm, and we run pretty much autonomously within the firm. We have a staff of about, right now, about 10 people, and have just been growing exponentially and love the marketplace. And in a time when I keep hearing how bad the personal injury field is in terms of getting business, we keep breaking records each year. So all due to Atticus and the philosophies that came from originally from the W Revenue seminar.
Hey, just a quick question, Russ. How much of your growth in your PI firm, because there may be other PI firms on the call, comes from advertising?
I don't advertise one bit.
I know it. That's what I wanted to tell people, because Russ is a great marketer, has a marketer's mindset. He thinks marketing, and one of the things that I think is important to understand is we don't have to be an advertiser in the PI world to be a very strong growth practice. Carl, do you want to say a little bit about your practice and why we should, where you are, those sort of things, and why we should refer to you?
Sure. Good morning to everyone. My office is in Houston, Texas, and Mark said he didn't mind if we told a little bit about the firm. So one of the things I teach is to do this elevator talk, and you've probably heard that from different things. But I know that there's a lot of people who inquire about Atticus from the estate planning sector. So my background was in petroleum engineering. Now we do oil and gas law. So if you have a project that you're trying to move properties in an estate that has to do with mineral interests, we can help you in Texas. We are, the last 2 years, we have been in the oil and gas bankruptcy sector. And but my firm is probably one of the number 1 or number 2 filer of mineral liens against oil and gas wells in the United States. The other firm is also in Houston as well. So there's the background, and I have been to DYR 3 times. It's I'm sure that's going to come up in our talk. So thank you.
Well, thanks, Carl. Thanks, Russ. Let me just jump into some questions. And either of you can jump in on these questions. I have about 6 or 8 questions, and you guys can please improvise, have your own questions, or take it wherever you want. But when you did the W Revenue Workshop, what was the hardest thing for you to do after you completed the workshop when it came to actually doubling your revenues?
Well, for me, and this is Russell, it was getting the team on board with what I had learned at the seminar, because obviously we didn't bring our team initially. Ultimately, we had Atticus come to the firm because we felt that was important as a follow-up. But initially, all of the things that were learned at the seminar that were exciting and groundbreaking had to be conveyed and convinced the people in the office that this was going to work and that they needed to be on board 100% for it to work.
Good. How about you, Carl?
Well, I was in a completely different mindset and foundation. I had reached the point I was disgusted with being a lawyer. I was a solo with a legal secretary. I had a part-time contract lawyer, but I had reached the point that I was working so hard and not making any money, and I was thinking about going in-house or something. I'd come from the engineering sector. And so they tell you this story, you can double in 5 years. Yeah, right. So for me, the hardest thing was having the mindset to recognize that I couldn't do it by myself anymore.
So just coming over that, it was no longer going to work. If I was going to double the revenues, I wasn't going to be able to do it by myself.
That's right.
Okay.
It was a mental shift more than anything.
And what was the biggest setback for you guys? Did you have a setback along the way that I think would have stopped the average person? Did you have any setbacks?
I'll do one, but it wasn't. My biggest setback wasn't the first time we doubled, and I did a calculation just before this thing because it was actually some questions. We've increased 656% since the first time we went in 2006. So that's like doubling 6 times,
right?
Almost 7. So, but one of our W revenue workshops I picked a goal that didn't work very well. It worked in that it succeeded, but for the wrong reasons. And my goal was to buy another law firm. So we did. We bought a law firm. The problem that developed is I didn't recognize the value of the corporate culture that we had created. We had created a corporate culture that we believed the Atticus model, and part of that model was money didn't matter, and it never did. Money didn't drive me, but I didn't know that. And what drove me was making clients happy. So when we brought in this other law firm, it was just a horrible ordeal. But we finished that thing. We're back on track again, so I'm fine.
That was a big setback for you. How about you, Russ?
The biggest setback was in our particular field was we grew too fast with respect to the plan. So what we did was we started the plan, we started seeing business, we started hiring people, and then had to learn that the people you hire become you and the face to all your clients. And right. it was a setback for us because we should have gone a little slower and we should have focused more on hiring slow and hire slow and fire fast, and we were just out of control in terms of the way we did things. So that I wouldn't say it was a full setback, but it certainly caused a hard turn to the left that took some time to steer back on course.
I'll mirror that with what Ross just said. That we did have that same thing as well. That was an interesting comment.
And this next question, Russ, you pretty much already answered. Carl, how about you? How did you get, because it was the hardest thing, was making sure you got your team on board. Carl, how did you get your team on board with the W revenue or the philosophy that you were taking?
Well, we didn't have a team at first. It was me and the secretary, and she said, why am I going to this thing? I said, well, these Atticus people say you got to bring your key staff, and you're it. So we did. But to get the team on board was the first full-time hire first full-time lawyer that I hired was shortly thereafter. And I was telling this new attorney, here's what we're doing and why, and I'm just going to follow this system and see if it can do something. He became fully on board, and within 3 months, he said, we need to go back to this W revenue workshop again. I said, but you have to double first before we can do that. And he said, no, we got to figure out how to double a second time in advance. So we need to do it together. And he was, so I guess your question is, he was on board kind of magically.
Right.
So we did double the first time in 23 months.
That's great. That's great. Let me ask another question. When you were, for those that are sort of like looking for a good tip, what were the key strategies that you implemented in doubling your revenue, and why?
Well, I can tell you the hardest part about doubling your revenue is your mindset and having a roadmap or a game plan. And even when you go to the seminar, it forces you to write everything down. It forces you to analyze it, but it's the actual implementation is the key strategy. Meaning, I'm going to turn your sentence inside out, is that for me, it meant setting a schedule and making the team understand that this was going to happen on a weekly basis. And during that week, I had certain goals. And I shared my goals with the team because it was a double the revenue for the firm. And I said, obviously, by doubling the firm's revenue, we're going to increase what you're going to get out of this as well. Bonuses, salary increases, more vacation time. You have to have the team on board. So my key strategy was first setting up the roadmap, second, sharing it with the team, and then third, having them understand that they had more responsibility here in a good way, because the only way for me to cause this to happen was for them to pick up what I was going to, in effect, stop doing. So those were my key strategies in the beginning.
Boy, that's a brilliant perspective, because you know, one of the things I see as a facilitator and working with law firms over the years, that it's great to come up with these wonderful strategies, and the strategies will work, but the biggest problem that people have is implementation, and getting their team engaged in the implementation, and then actually executing on what we said we were going to do. And it's all wonderful, but without the execution, it falls apart. That's great. Carl, how about you?
Well, since my background was engineering, I'm a little less excited about the touchy-feely kinds of concepts. So I had to see an exact thing. So I'm going to describe the thing that worked for me, and I don't know if it's going to work for everybody else. But one of the goals that I wanted to do, and we'd gone to this thing, or I went to this thing in February 2006. And one of my goals is I wanted to do something different with my staff on bonuses. So at the end of the first quarter, now I went in February, so it's not supposed to be immediate. But anyway, by the end of the first quarter, I'm feeling pretty disgusted. And I told my wife, who's an accountant, that this sucks. I'm done. And she says, well, let me come in, look at your books. And she says, well, you get an A+. You're up 2%. I said, well, how come I don't have any money? But here's what we did. In that month, at the end of March, I pulled my staff together, what little there was, me and the secretary and a part-time attorney. I said, we are no longer going to have annual bonuses. We're going to have quarterly bonuses, and we're going to have quarterly reviews. And so here's yours. We did good. We're up 2%, so everybody got a bonus. And it was not much. It was a couple $100. So my record month of all time, believe it or not, the very next month. I went, well, imagine that. So we kept doing the quarterly, which, and I have to say, I kind of hated it because I did a quarterly review, a performance review, and I still do that. But it forces me to sit down with each person and say, here's what we're doing, what kind of goals you want to do, what do we in the next quarter. That was a miracle for me. And I mean, I can go through lots of others, but that was one of the goals on what you described when you go through your roadmap and you build your goals. And Russell, you talked about that. that was one of mine. There were some others, but that was a big one.
Well, it's similar to what Russ is saying, is that it's execution, and execution comes with sitting down with the team, making sure we're focused on the right things, and what you did is make sure I'm compensating for the right things. So that was great. Very, very good. Other than more revenue, what was the biggest achievement or reward you gained from the workshop so far?
That one's easy. More personal time, less work.
I agree, absolutely. Believe it or not, absolutely less time, and I didn't believe that when I heard it. I don't know anybody who believes it when they hear it.
I know it. I don't.
It does. What I end up doing is I work less hours on legal stuff, but the time that I do is working on planning and staff meetings, which I didn't used to like, and they all laugh at me, but they're so critical. Keeps everybody focused. And we do a retreat once a year. We're doing one in 2 weeks.
Russ, were you going to jump on that?
I was just going to say from when I first started, when I heard that, that the whole objective, at least when I started, and I think I was probably one of the very first attendees because I think I went in 2004.
You did. You were one of the first.
Yeah. And it was very hard for me, and looking back, it still is hard to believe when I heard it the first time that I was going to double my revenue and work less. And it just seemed to be a contradiction that was insurmountable. What ended up happening was I found that once you implemented the strategies, the income came in, the business picked up, your time involvement as the attorney and the practitioner has to change, and then it became a totally different world. One of my goals for 2016 was to double my vacations, which I went from 3 vacations to I took 7 vacations last year. And our income went up, our profitability went up, our number of new cases went up by almost 30%, and I was away on 7 vacations, and some of them were at least 2 weeks long, and my staff still complained that they had too much business. So it can work as soon as you kind of absorb the concept, the tools, and then continue to implement them. And over the years, I've seen more work at times, because when you start to double your revenue and the business picks up, you then have to implement changes to the team. Otherwise, you fall back in, and I have had those little ups and downs where all of a sudden we had so much business, the team couldn't handle it. I was back to working 60, 70, 80 hours a week until I stopped and looked at my notes, and I analyzed the firm and said, this is absurd. And we changed the makeup of the team and the structure and gave people promotions and, made them more important in the firm, and that allowed everything to settle back down, because we learned that there were pipes that got clogged and you had to figure out ways to unclog them.
It's interesting because it's not called the double your stress program. It's not called the double your overhead program. It's called double your revenues. We have to keep telling people that. And so it's a great point. You guys, that's an interesting segue to the next question. Has your view about your legal skills versus your business skills shifted?
Well, I can tell you mine are going to shift drastically starting in March, because we have so much new business now that I am actually going to stop practicing on cases, and the team doesn't know it yet, so hopefully no one called in on this one. But I'm actually moving towards being out of the office permanently and giving it a try, other than taking client calls, because every one of my clients has my cell number. And because they have it, they don't abuse it. But I have been taking in so much new business, and I see the opportunities to continue to double or triple it again. And mine is probably quintupled since I took it, if not more, back in 2004. But I have given people the strategies, brought them on board, and I'm going to be changing up the teams so that they are able to basically be in charge. What Mark alluded to earlier in one of his points, that we have to give them the responsibilities and move them up through. And the main thing I want to teach them is that when it was all about money, I will say we were very successful. When it became all about the people, all about our clients, that quadrupled. And that's been the hardest mindset to bring across, because it's part of the Atticus philosophy of basically, you know, enjoying life, enjoying your business, and making more money while you're doing it. And I've been slowly bringing it to the team, but they're going to see it full time when I change my view about legal skills, because I want to eliminate being the practitioner and strictly be the rainmaker.
You know, one of the things that you're very good at in thinking about, Russ, is that and it's a great way for people listening to this think about the practice. If you want to double your revenues, start by doubling the value you give your clients. It's a good place to start. Carl, did you want to say anything about the view of legal skills versus business skills?
I've been looking at this question on the screen here. For my personal view, I had already had some background in technical sales, so the business skill shift wasn't as great for me. But I want to pick up on something that Russell said, and that's in the concept of creation of profit centers within my firm. And I have noticed what a dramatic shift in my other lawyers as they grow and as they have attended some of the workshops, because a couple of my lawyers now have been to W revenue workshops themselves, portions of it, I should say, and they are now shifting their skill set into more of a business side and less of that they have to do the work. And that has just been, I'm not sure how to describe it. That's an explosion.
Yeah.
And you just see these light bulbs just go off, and they recognize that, wait a minute, now they have this sector that they can build within this firm. That is, I've noticed that one, and I think that's what Russell's looking at. You give them more autonomy, and they just do it.
Yeah. So, you know, we talked about stepping into the market leader mindset, and that's where we start to set up, I mentioned something called talent vacuums. And it means that when I step away from doing something, it creates a vacuum and an opportunity for someone else to step in. As long as I'm sitting in the firm, micromanaging people, it can stifle them. Everyone on this call has had their major growth from given an opportunity to make a mistake and learn and grow. And if we're always doing it ourselves, we don't give that opportunity, we don't get a chance, and we don't get what Carl's talking about, is the opportunity for those profit centers. And, by the way, people around you that are excited about what they're doing, not coming to work because they have to. There's two questions I'm going to step over because you guys have pretty much answered these questions, and I'm going to step to the next one. Mike, in the background, let me just say this. After I finish these two questions, I'll open it up for questions from the participants on this call. And Mike told you how to do that. You can write in your question and Mike will capture it, or you can raise your hand and Mike will call on you. But I wanted to give you a heads up, we'll be doing that in a few minutes. But for Carl and Russ, if you had to give people one piece of advice to do something, one piece of advice for someone thinking about doing it, what would that be?
That's easy. Don't think about it, just do it.
I started to write that down as well. I think you have to recognize, I went back at some of the notes I took from the first time I did this program, and I looked at it that this was a big investment. This is a lot of money. It wasn't that much money. I mean, oh my goodness, I made that back multiple times, but I looked at it that it was an investment. And then when they said to bring your key staff member or members with you, I just did it. And that, my recommendation is to follow Russell's advice and do it, and take your key staff with you. They're going to make it fun for you, and it makes it so much easier to create a buy-in to the program. It's not dictatorial. Next thing you know, they want you out of the way so they can do it.
Yeah, I know it. I have another question, but I think it's kind of redundant. If someone told you it's a gimmick, which, because you've got to imagine that attorneys are really trained to be critical thinkers, and after dealing with a couple hundred clients, you can become a cynical thinker. And so it's not unusual if someone says you can double your revenue, they think, oh, it's a gimmick. Nobody really doubles their revenue. What would you say to them? I know this sounds kind of redundant to things you talked about, but is there something you would say to them?
Well, for me, at least, when I went to this seminar, and I was different. I wasn't a partner at the time. I was a senior associate, and there were 4 partners, and they took me with them. And obviously, I wasn't the one paying for it. So where I started in all of this, I didn't have to reach into my pocket the way later we would gladly do to bring staff members over, and Atticus came to the firm. But, for me, it was all just, wow, someone's going to give me the opportunity to learn how to double my revenue. And obviously for the firm, they felt it was important, and all I can tell you is, looking back, it was an incredible, hell of a good investment for them, because I doubled my revenue, of which they were getting 2/3 of every dollar I brought in. So they went to a different seminar. They were at a different one than I was at, because they were making double, 66 cents on every dollar I brought in, and I was doubling mine.
Carl, anything for you there?
Yeah, I'll add. One of the speakers at one of the Atticus workshops, I can't remember, a famous guy, says lawyers are the fastest conceptual thinkers on the planet, but they're not the wealthiest necessarily people on the planet, because they're so risk adverse. And so we just normally hear these 2 guys talking about, oh, look, I'm great and wonderful. No, we're not great and wonderful. It's just, and there aren't any magic formulas. The goal setting is going to be, it was me setting my own goals, and then learning, I guess the important part is how to implement those goals. So I don't know what to,
yeah,
you got to try for yourself.
It's sort of like back to what Russ is saying, is you might have that thinking, you might have that belief, but just do it.
Just do it. Just do it.
And I'll give some people a little bit of peace on this question as well, peace of mind on it. So here's what I'm going to do, Mike. I'm going to tell people, if they're still curious, or they say, Carl and Russ, you guys, I might think a gimmick if Mark says it, but I believe you guys, and you want to register. I'm going to tell them how. And then Carl and Russ, if there's a question I haven't asked you, we'll come back to you on that you'd like to answer. And we'll open it up to participants to see if they have a question. So first, let me just talk a little bit. If you're someone that is saying, I absolutely need to do it, this is appropriate for me, I need to do it, you can go to the atticusadvantage.com website. So it's right there on the screen, atticusadvantage.com. And there's an events location. You can just register right there, and it'll give you the next dates, which is February and March. February is in Orlando. March is in LA. So you can register there, or up to the right, there's a phone number. And you can just call and say, register me for the W Revenue Workshop, and someone will take care of you. So,
Hey, Mark.
Atticus, yes.
I just want to say, if you visit those links there for the different dates on those pages, if you want to hear from even more graduates of the program, there's a video on those pages with more graduates of the program talking about their experiences as well. So if what Carl and Russ had to say piqued your interest, but you want to hear more, watch the video on those pages.
Listen, who would need more than Carl or Russ? Come on. So that's one place to do it. And this is the peace of mind. There's nothing, it goes back to what I think Russ and Carl are pointing to. So if you really believe in what you're doing and you want to double your revenue, you'll double the value, and you won't have any hesitancy about it. So that anyone attends an Atticus workshop or an Atticus program, at any point, if they have a concern or it wasn't anything that was promised to them, they're going to get their money back. And it's no big deal. It's like we know that you'll be blown away. But if you're not, for some reason, it's okay. There's a 100% money back guarantee on everything we do. So that's up to you. You shouldn't have that shouldn't be a concern. The money shouldn't be a concern for anyone else. If you're still not sure what you want to do or whether it's a fit for you, there's a couple of other things you could do that are not as expensive and simple. The practice growth diagnostic. This is where you spend an hour on the phone, and one of the advisors is going to go through an analysis of your practice. They're going to go through your marketing, your staffing, your time management, cash flow issues, and they're going to look at your behavioral profile, a DISC assessment, and they're going to look at your strengths and some of the things you need to work on. That costs $295 to do. But what they will do is give you a lot of good direction, and if there's a program that's right for you, then they'll make suggestions. But if you know that the W revenue is something you want to do, you can register for that. Mike, I apologize, I should know this, but the cost of the W revenue workshop.
Yes, it's $995 for the first attorney and $795 for each additional staff person or other attorney that you bring.
Great,
and that includes lunch and snacks is provided there as well.
Good, thank you. So the diagnostic, so it's a practice growth diagnostic. It's $295. So the W revenue, I don't want to confuse anyone, is $995. The practice growth diagnostic, which is I'm not sure and I really want to just look at my practice, you can do this. You can go to that same website, atticusadvantage.com, and there's a Let's Get Started button down in the bottom left you'll see there. Click that and someone will set up a diagnostic for you. So that's another way that you can do it. Here are the dates. We'll be in Orlando in February. We'll be in Los Angeles in March. And I hope we're in Boston in June. I don't know where we're going to be, but I hope it's Boston. Okay. So, and if you just want to contact someone to talk to you and you don't want to do the DISC or the diagnostic or you're not sure yet, just email hello@atticusadvantage.com and someone will be in touch with you. So, Mike, I'll turn this back over to you first to see if anyone has any questions and if there's any closing comments from Russ or Carl, we can go there.
Great. Just a reminder, if you want to send in a question, there are a couple ways to do that. You can use the chat function on your GoToWebinar dashboard. If you'd like that question to remain anonymous, meaning not mention your name, please indicate so. You can also click the hand icon and I'll call on you and I'll unmute you so that you can be heard by everyone. We do have one question that came in. Russ, this is directed at you. How did Russ market if not by advertising? So how did you build your business, Russ? Because you're a personal injury attorney. All we see are those commercials, right, for car wrecks and everything else.
I mean, there are companies, firms out there that do a lot of online marketing, a lot of TV marketing, radio marketing. They're all reduced down to one or two of the big players who've been there forever, but we took a different approach. We decided to do, at least my philosophy is more of grassroots. I like to say a living Facebook. I'm a firm believer in face-to-face contact. I don't believe that anybody is going to be happy without meeting the lawyer. So what we started doing was marketing internal to clients. Every single call that everybody has to this day with a client in my firm ends with asking for more business. And there are many, many scripts for doing that. It becomes second nature. That's one of the major areas. and our referral business is huge. The other target, one of the things we did was through lawyer-to-lawyer marketing. There are so many lawyers out there that I hate to use the term county lawyers, so I'll use the term general practitioners in small towns that do a little bit of everything, and that's great until they get into complex cases where they don't know what they're doing. And you know, my experience level after almost 33 years, having been a defense attorney for a number of those years, as well as, you know, trying a number of cases. Nowadays, it's very hard to try cases because everything settles at a mediation or an arbitration. So somebody with trial experience is somewhat exceptional in our marketplace. We started marketing to other lawyers, and then we started marketing within providers that we saw on a regular basis coming up in treating our existing clients, orthopedic surgeons, neurosurgeons. So it was a combination. To be honest, we really had no direction initially, and it kind of goes with my philosophy, which I think was said in a different way through one of Mark's quotes, which is, you can't reach goals that you can't see. And what Atticus did was it gave us those, it let us see all the goals. And then, you know, it's kind of like those, you know, I was on vacation, I was riding in a carriage with a horse with the blinders on pulling me, and I'm thinking, that's the way I used to think. And now I'm here on vacation. I think it was my 6th or 7th vacation. I was doing that in Aruba, and I'm thinking, that's from thinking outside the box and looking everywhere except at doing the law itself.
Great. Thank you, Russ. Before I get to our next question, something I want to point out, you know, when we think about obstacles to going to workshops like this, you know, you saw that our locations are Orlando and Los Angeles, and Mark mentioned possibly Boston. We've done them in the middle of the country too. The distance to go to one of these workshops is when we talk to graduates afterward, and Mark, you may have heard this, but I know when I've talked to some of them, that the actual travel time actually has been wonderful for them, because pre-workshop and on their way home, they get uninterrupted time. That plane ride sometimes is part of the best part of it. When no one can interrupt you, you can work on your plan, you really get clear thinking, and the travel itself actually has been a benefit for some of them, that actually the travel to and back home has been a great time for them to really think about everything that they soaked in. So our next question is, I am a solo practitioner with no on-site staff. I use an off-site receptionist. Do you believe this seminar would be valuable for me?
How about if I answer that one?
Yeah.
I started as a solo. The answer is absolutely yes. Absolutely yes. In fact, my bottom line is I found every time I do something with one of the Atticus model concepts, it pays off in an increase in income, more satisfaction in work, and larger bonuses to the staff that you add. You may or may not want staff. But
And you were solo the first time that you took the workshop.
I was.
Correct? Yeah.
That's right. And we have 7 lawyers now, counting me, and 4 paralegals now.
I would just add to that being a solo practitioner shouldn't want to keep you from doubling your revenue.
Sure. Okay. There are no other questions that have been typed in so far. If there are any, I'll let you know. But Russ and Carl, is there anything else that either of you would like to add that Mark didn't ask you about?
I would just say that, you know, overall, it's much greater than doubling your revenue. It's changing the way you view your practice, more importantly, changing the way you view your life, getting more time with family, more vacation time, and it changes the way you work. And that's the key. It's a system of balance, and it helps you to set goals, to find the goals to set the goals, then implement the goals with accountability that ultimately they produce so much in so many areas that I know it sounds hard to believe, but it does work if you're willing to pull the trigger and try it.
I'll add a one more comment as well, because there's always a little bit more you can do. There's always something more to learn. We all know that as lawyers. But just in the last month, I mean, I told y'all what our numbers are. We're up 26% over last year, and we're in the oil and gas business in Texas. And everybody out there that's on this call can read the newspapers as what's happened in this particular industry segment. And we've done other areas, real estate and everything, but primarily the last 2 years, that was the needs of our client base. So I was talking to our team, and we were going over how well we did in the year, and one of them says, well, that's just because we were in such a great economy. I said, are you kidding me? That's fantastic. But I know better. It wasn't the economy. It was because of what we learned from Atticus. And when I pointed that out, a couple of them said, oh, I didn't think about that. It was great.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much. Thank you, Mark. Thank you to everybody who attended. We did record today's session, and we will have the video available for streaming for yourself again if you'd like to re-watch it or re-listen or share it with someone else. You'll be contacted by our team with those materials. Mark, is there anything else before we end?
Just thank you to Carl and Russ for, one of the things I love about people that open up their perspective, open up their mind, and work on their practices. They're not worried about sharing and helping other people's grow. And it's really just a big acknowledgement to you guys for your commitment to the profession, the commitment to people around you, and the work you've done for your clients. So thank you for being on the call.
All right.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody. We will end the webinar now. Have a great day, and look to hear from us again.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
Thanks.
That's great.